There are moments in life when you discover what you're truly made of, not in times of joy, but when you're standing in a pawn shop with your wedding ring in your trembling hand, 3 hungry children waiting at home, and 2 weeks until men in black suits come back for money you don't have. Today, I want to share with you a story about love, betrayal, and the impossible choices we make when survival becomes the only thing that matters. It's not a comfortable story, and there's no fairy tale ending, but it's mine, and maybe somewhere in it, you'll find a truth that resonates with your own struggles. My name is Margaret O'Connor, though everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 68 years old now, sitting here in my small Chicago apartment with a cup of coffee that's gone cold while I've been lost in memories. Outside, the winter sky matches the grey I remember from those hardest years. I worked as a waitress for 43 years before my knees finally gave out, and these gnarled hands tell the story of every plate I carried, every table I cleaned, every double shift I pulled when there was no other choice. But let me take you back to 1985, when I was 29 years old and still believed that love could conquer anything. I met Patrick O'Connor in 1977 at a St. Patrick's Day party in our neighbourhood on the south side. He was fresh off the boat from County Cork, all charm and laughter, with eyes green as the Irish hills he'd left behind. When Patrick smiled, it was like the sun breaking through clouds. You couldn't help but smile back. He had that way about him, you know, made you feel like you were the only person in the world worth talking to. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at St. Bridget's Church, with me in a borrowed dress and Patrick in his only suit. He slipped a simple gold band on my finger that day, nothing fancy, just what he could afford from his first paycheck working construction. But to me, it might as well have been a diamond from Tiffany's. Those first years were good, really good. We had Tommy in 1978, a beautiful boy with his father's green eyes. Katie came in 1980, all blonde curls and giggles. Sean, our surprise baby, arrived in 1983. We lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, but it was ours. I'd work the morning shift at Rosie's Diner on Clark Street, and Patrick would take whatever construction jobs he could find. Money was tight, sure, but we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. The gambling started small, so small I almost missed it. Friday night poker games with his buddies from work. He'd come home with $20 less, sometimes 20 more, and I didn't think much of it. All the men did it, didn't they? Just harmless fun, blowing off steam after a hard week. Then the Friday games became Saturday afternoons at Arlington Park Racetrack, then Sundays too. I'd ask him about it, and he'd laugh it off, kiss my forehead, tell me not to worry. Just a bit of fun, Mags, he'd say. I'll win us something nice. But there was never anything nice. Instead, there were mysterious phone calls he'd take in the hallway, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Bills started arriving late, then not getting paid at all. In 1986, I picked up extra shifts, working the dinner rush after my morning shift ended. 14 hours a day on my feet, my back screaming, my feet swollen in my worn-out shoes. I'd come home at midnight to find Patrick gone and the kids asleep in front of the television, Tommy trying to take care of his younger siblings. I confronted him one night in November of 1986. I'd found a betting slip in his jacket pocket for $500. Money we didn't have. He promised to stop, swore on his mother's grave, on our children's lives. He cried, and God help me, I believed him. I wanted so desperately to believe him. Christmas, 1987, should have been magical. Katie was 7 and believed in Santa with all her heart. Tommy, at 9, was just starting to question but still wanted to believe. Little Sean at 4 was nothing but pure wonder. I'd been saving in secret, hiding $20 here, $10 there from my tips, keeping it in a coffee can under the bathroom sink. I had almost $300 saved for presents and a Christmas ham, maybe even a small tree. On December 23rd, I came home from my morning shift to find Patrick sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. The coffee can was empty. He'd found it, taken it all, lost it all on a basketball game. I don't remember screaming, but Tommy told me later that I did. I remember the look on Patrick's face, shame and defiance mixed together in a way that made my stomach turn. That's when I started making a plan, not to leave, I couldn't afford to leave, but to survive whatever was coming. I hid money in the lining of my winter coat. I kept a $20 bill taped inside one of Katie's old storybooks. I started lying about my tip money, telling Patrick I'd made less than I had. Then came December 24th, 1987. Christmas Eve. The kids were in their room, playing with old toys, not knowing there would be nothing under our bare living room corner the next morning. I was in the kitchen, trying to make something out of nothing. Pasta with butter, the last of the bread, some eggs that were almost expired. The knock on the door came at 7 o'clock. Heavy, purposeful knocks that made my blood run cold. 2 men in black suits stood in our hallway, and they looked nothing like the neighborhood guys who came by for poker games. These men had dead eyes and expensive watches. The taller one smiled, but it never reached those eyes. "Mrs. O'Connor," he said, his voice polite but carrying an edge sharp as a knife, "we need to speak with Patrick." Patrick came to the door, and I saw him turn pale, actually saw the colour drain from his face like water down a sink. "Mike, Tony, I told you I'd have something by the end of the month." "It is the end of the month, Patrick," the taller one, Mike, said calmly. "Well, close enough. $30,000. That's what you owe us, plus interest. We've been very patient. $30,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. $30,000. We'd be lucky to have $30 between us. That was more than I made in 2 years of working double shifts. That was impossible. "I don't have it right now," Patrick said, and his voice was shaking, "but I've got a line on a sure thing. New Year's Day, I can—" "No more sure things," Mike interrupted. "You've got 2 weeks, Patrick. January 7th, 30,000, or we start taking other forms of payment." His eyes slid to me, then toward the hallway where I could hear the kids playing. The threat didn't need to be spoken. I understood perfectly. They left. Patrick closed the door and slid down against it, landing on the floor like a puppet with cut strings. He was crying, actually sobbing, his shoulders shaking. "Maggie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. I swear to God, I'll fix this." I stood there looking down at my husband, and I felt nothing. The panic would come later, the fear, the rage, but in that moment, I just felt empty. I walked to our bedroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the cracked mirror above our dresser. 29 years old with dark circles under my eyes, wearing a waitress uniform that smelled like grease and desperation. 3 children I loved more than life itself, and a husband who'd just gambled away our future. The next 2 weeks were a blur of Patrick making promises he couldn't keep. He borrowed money from his brother, $2,000 that disappeared into a poker game on New Year's Eve because he was sure he could multiply it. He sold our television, our radio, tools from his construction job. He came up with maybe 5,000 total, still 25,000 short, with 3 days to go. On January 12th, the electricity was cut off. I'd had to choose between the electric bill and food, and I chose food. But the power company didn't care about my reasons. We had no heat, no lights. Chicago in January is brutal, and our apartment might as well have been a refrigerator. I bundled the kids in every piece of clothing they owned, and we slept in one bed, huddled together for warmth. Patrick stopped coming home. I didn't know where he was, didn't care. I was too busy trying to keep my children alive. I'd bring home leftovers from the diner, cold French fries, half-eaten burgers that customers didn't finish, day-old bread the owner was going to throw away. My pride died somewhere in the garbage bins behind Rosie's diner, but my children ate. On the morning of January 15th, I woke up to Katie crying. "Mama, I'm so hungry. My tummy hurts." She was shivering even under all the blankets, her little lips almost blue. Tommy wasn't crying, but his eyes were too old for 9 years, full of an understanding no child should have. Sean, bless him, was too young to really grasp how bad things were, but he whimpered for breakfast we didn't have. I had 67 cents in my purse, 67 cents and 3 hungry children, and men who would be back in less than a week for money I could never have. I looked down at my left hand, at the simple gold band that had sat there for 10 years. It wasn't worth much. Patrick had bought it with his first week's wages, probably cost him $75 back in '77. But it was mine. It was the promise we'd made to each other, for better or worse, in sickness and health. It was the only thing of value I owned. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the ring off. 10 years of wearing it had left a pale indent in my finger, a ghostly reminder of what I was about to do. I kissed it once, then put it in my coat pocket. "Tommy," I said, my voice steady somehow, "you're in charge. Keep your brother and sister in bed under the blankets. I'll be back in an hour." The pawn shop on Milwaukee Avenue had a flickering neon sign that read "Cash for Gold." I'd walked past it 1,000 times and never thought I'd go inside. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, and the man behind the counter looked up from his newspaper. He was maybe 60, with thick glasses and liver spots on his hands. "Help you?" he asked. I couldn't speak. I just held out my ring. He took it, examined it under a magnifying glass, weighed it on a small scale. "Not much gold here," he said. "I can give you 150. I wanted to argue, to tell him it was worth more, but we both knew I had no leverage. I nodded. He counted out 7 20s and a 10, sliding them across the counter. I stared at the money, $150 for 10 years of marriage, for every promise we'd made, for the hope I'd carried on my finger. The man was already putting my ring in a display case before I'd even left. Outside, the January wind cut through my thin coat. I walked 3 blocks to the grocery store, that money burning in my pocket. $150. It wouldn't pay the electric bill. It wouldn't even make a dent in what Patrick owed. But it would feed my children. I bought carefully, nothing wasted. White bread, peanut butter, jelly, milk, eggs, pasta, canned soup. Apples because Katie loved apples. I spent $87 on groceries and used $60 to make a partial payment on the electric bill, enough to get them to turn it back on with a promise of more to come. I kept the $3 left over for emergencies. When I got home, the kids' faces lit up like Christmas morning. Tommy helped me put the groceries away, while Katie and Sean bounced around the kitchen. I made them peanut butter sandwiches and poured glasses of milk, and watching them eat, really eat, made something in my chest crack open. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in our dark bathroom with the door closed and cried without making a sound. I cried for the girl I'd been who thought love was enough. I cried for the marriage that was already over, even if neither of us had said it yet. I cried for my children who deserved so much better. And I cried because I knew this was just the beginning, that selling my wedding ring was just the first of many pieces of myself I'd have to sacrifice. Patrick came home the next evening. I was at the stove making pasta, and he walked into the kitchen like a ghost. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. He started to say something, then stopped when he saw my left hand. "Maggie," his voice broke. "Your ring. Where's your ring?" I didn't turn around. I just kept stirring the pasta. "I sold it. We needed food. The electric company needed a payment." I heard him make a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph, Maggie, I'm so sorry. Don't," I said quietly. "Just don't." He left the kitchen. I heard the front door close. He was gone for 3 days. When he came back, it was different. He had a piece of paper in his hand, a job contract from Stevenson Shipping Company on the docks. Hard labor, loading and unloading cargo ships. Brutal work, especially in winter, but steady pay, union wages. "I start Monday," he said. "I'm done, Maggie. I'm done gambling. I swear on everything holy, I'm done." I looked at him and said nothing. Words meant nothing anymore. Only actions mattered. He kept his promise about the gambling. He worked the docks 12 hours a day, came home exhausted and smelling of diesel and sweat. Every penny went to paying off his debt. He made arrangements with Mike and Tony, small payments every week, interest that would take years to clear, but it kept them from our door. But something else was broken that couldn't be fixed by keeping promises. We lived in the same apartment, raised the same children, but we were strangers. I worked my shifts at the diner. He worked his shifts on the docks. We spoke about bills and schedules and what the kids needed for school. We hadn't shared a bed as husband and wife since that Christmas Eve. I slept in the kids' room, on the floor, anywhere but next to him. The kids grew up in that cold silence between us. Tommy became serious, responsible beyond his years, always worrying about money. At 12, he got a paper route to help pay for his own school supplies. Katie became a peacemaker, always trying to make everyone happy, smoothing over tensions she was too young to understand. Sean, my baby, he was the only one who stayed sweet, maybe because he'd been too young to remember the worst of it. Years passed. Patrick worked, I worked. We paid off the debt by 1992. The kids graduated high school one by one. Tommy got a scholarship to DePaul University, worked his way through, ended up in finance. Katie became a social worker, drawn to helping families like ours had been. Sean went to community college, became an electrician. Patrick never gambled again. Not once in all those years. He'd walk past a racetrack like it was radioactive. He'd leave the room if poker came on television. He was true to his word. But we never found our way back to each other. How could we? Too much had been lost. Too much trust turned to ash. In 1998, on a cold February morning, Patrick collapsed at work. massive heart attack. He was 52 years old. They called me at the diner, and I rushed to Northwestern Memorial, still wearing my uniform, my shoes squeaking on the hospital floors. But by the time I got there, he was gone. The kids and I went through his things at the small apartment he'd been renting near the docks. We'd been officially separated for 2 years by then, though really we'd been separated for much longer. Among his few possessions, work clothes, a few books, a photo of the kids, I found a small wooden box tucked in the back of his closet. Inside was my wedding ring, the simple gold band I'd sold 13 years earlier. And beneath it, a note in Patrick's handwriting, the letters shaky like he'd been crying while he wrote it. Maggie, I found this in a pawn shop on the South Side in 1993. Took me 5 years of looking, going to every shop in Chicago on my days off, but I knew it was yours the moment I saw it. I remembered every scratch, every tiny imperfection. I spent 6 months' worth of overtime pay to buy it back. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything good we had. I know that selling this ring was the moment you finally gave up on me, and I earned that. But I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wishing I could go back and be the man you thought you married. I'm sorry I couldn't be strong enough when it mattered. I'm sorry I made you choose between your marriage and your children. I'm sorry I wasn't worth keeping the ring for. I love you. I always loved you. I'm sorry. Patrick. I sat on the floor of his empty apartment and read that note 10 times. Then I put the ring on my finger for the first time in 13 years, and I cried for the man he'd tried to be, for the man he'd almost been, for everything we'd lost and could never get back. Now I'm 68 years old, and that ring sits in my jewelry box. I take it out sometimes, hold it up to the light, remember everything, the good and the terrible. My children are grown with families of their own. Tommy makes good money in finance, lives in the suburbs with his wife and 2 kids. He won't even buy a lottery ticket. The trauma of those years lives in him still, in his almost obsessive control over money, his need for security above all else. Katie works with struggling families on the South Side, helps them navigate welfare and food stamps and housing assistance. I see myself in the families she helps, desperate mothers making impossible choices. She calls me every Sunday without fail. She's never said it, but I think she became a social worker because she wanted to be able to help people the way nobody helped us. Sean, my youngest, he's the one who forgave, really forgave, not just said the words. He brings his kids to visit every other weekend, and we make cookies together in my tiny kitchen. He talks about his dad sometimes, remembering the good parts, how Patrick taught him to throw a baseball, the time they built a birdhouse together. He chose to keep the love and let go of the anger. I don't know how he did that. I still haven't figured it out. People ask me sometimes if I regret not leaving Patrick, if I think things would have been better for the kids if I'd walked away. The truth is, I don't know. Maybe Tommy wouldn't be so controlled. Maybe Katie wouldn't feel responsible for everyone's happiness. But maybe Patrick would have spiraled further without us, died alone in some alley behind a casino instead of on the docks after 13 years of honest work. Maybe my leaving would have confirmed for him that he was beyond redemption. I think about that a lot, how our worst moments don't define us completely, but they do shape everything that comes after. Patrick was a gambler who destroyed his family's security, yes, but he was also a man who worked himself to death, trying to make amends, who spent 5 years searching pawn shops to buy back a $75 ring because it meant something to me. He was both of those men at once, and I was a woman who sold her wedding ring to feed her children, who chose their survival over her marriage vows. But I was also a woman who stayed, who worked 14-hour days for years, who never gave up even when giving up would have been easier. I was both of those women at once. Life isn't a story with heroes and villains. It's messier than that. It's doing the best you can with impossible choices and then living with the consequences. It's loving someone and leaving them emotionally at the same time. It's breaking promises to keep other promises. It's standing in a pawn shop with shaking hands and making a choice you'll think about for the rest of your life. I've learned that love isn't just the feeling you have on your wedding day when everything is possible and the future is bright. Love is also feeding your children on day-old bread and cold French fries from the garbage. Love is working yourself to the bone. Love is making the choice to sell the symbol of your marriage so the marriage's children can eat. Love is spending 5 years searching pawn shops to buy back a ring you had no right to ask for forgiveness with. Patrick and I loved each other. We also failed each other. Both things are true. Both things will always be true. Sometimes late at night, I think about that girl at St. Bridget's Church in 1977 in her borrowed dress, believing that love would be enough. I want to tell her so many things. I want to warn her, but I also know she wouldn't listen, and maybe she shouldn't, because those 3 children, serious Tommy, caring Katie, forgiving Sean, they're worth every hardship. They're worth the cold apartments and the empty cupboards and the ring I sold and the marriage that crumbled. They're worth all of it. I keep Patrick's note in the box with the ring. Sometimes I read it and feel angry all over again. Sometimes I read it and feel sad. And sometimes, very rarely, I read it and feel something like forgiveness creeping in at the edges. The young mother who sold her wedding ring and the old widow who holds it now are the same person, but we're also not. Time changes us, hardship changes us, loss changes us, but we survive. We make impossible choices and we survive them. We break and we somehow keep going. That's what I want young people to understand. When life puts you in a position where every choice is terrible, you make the least terrible choice you can, and you keep breathing. You feed your children. You work your shifts. You survive another day. And somehow, before you know it, years have passed and you're still here. Your children are grown. Your hands are worn. Your heart is scarred, but you're still here. And that ring in my jewelry box, it's not a symbol of happily ever after. It's a symbol of survival, of impossible choices, of love that wasn't enough but was still real, of a man who tried to make amends and a woman who tried to keep her family together, and both of them failing and succeeding at the same time. I sold my wedding ring on January 15th, 1988, and Patrick bought it back in 1993, and neither action erased the other. Both are true, both matter. That's what 38 years have taught me, that life contains multitudes, that people are more complicated than any single choice they make, that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing, and you just have to live with it. So when I sit here in my small apartment, holding a cup of cold coffee, looking at that ring, I don't regret selling it. I don't regret that Patrick bought it back. I don't regret staying. I don't regret the distance between us. I just accept that all of it happened, all of it was necessary, and somehow we all survived. That's enough. Sometimes survival is enough.